right, hey, welcome back to the Peanut Gallery. We are pretty excited. We are doing our first special, really, and it is an election special. So at the beginning, I don't know if you remember, but we weren't sure if anybody would even come talk to us, period. And so we're pretty shocked that the federal candidates in our area have agreed to join us. And so we're thrilled to be able to do these interviews. So today we have with us Katelyn Cody.
Katelyn!
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. You guys are my first interview.
Wow, seriously? Okay, so hopefully we're not going to suck too bad.
I'm so excited. There's no bar.
There's no well, we can reach that one. So just before we get going, as some of you guys watching are going to be like, oh man, I hope they ask this and this. The goal of this Peanut Gallery the entire time has always been story and getting to know people and building community. And we're not changing that for this election. And so the goal with these is to get to know you. We firmly believe that knowing who we're sending to Ottawa matters more than necessarily your policies, because sometimes politicians say they're going to do policies, but they're not going to do them. Sometimes. But if you have integrity and you have character and we get to know you, we feel like that gives us a good chance to actually elect well. And so we're hoping to get to know you guys. First of all, just thanks for running. So before we get into any of the other stuff, thanks for stepping up. Stepping up in office, that must take a lot. So thank you for all that. But without further ado, no one's here to listen to me. So let's start with this. So give me a little bit of a background. Who is Katelyn Cody? Give me a bit of background, where you're from, how you got here, that kind of stuff.
All right. So I'm actually from outside of the riding. The NDP was looking for candidates and they didn't have someone within Elgin, Middlesex, London. So they reached out to me. I grew up on the edge of the riding, just outside of Strathroy. And they thought, you know, you're close enough. You probably know a lot of the issues that are going on. And I was thrilled when they reached out. Southwestern Ontario is Southwestern Ontario. Like the borders are kind of arbitrary. We're all facing the same pandemic. We all have the same housing crisis and the issues with jobs. So I was more than happy to step up. I'm a small town girl. I'm the youngest of 4. I have 3 older brothers and 2 super smart nieces, and my family is everything to me. So that's what I do. I hang out outside. I am a political junkie, and I spend a lot of time with my family.
Okay, so you spent your whole life here. You didn't move here from somewhere. You're like born and raised Southern Ontario?
Born and raised Southern Ontario. I did spend like 4-ish years in Ottawa. I always came home in the summer. Okay. But I went to the University of Ottawa for my undergraduate. So. Okay, so what got you interested in politics? Like, why politics? Political junkie. Like, you don't hear that too often. So I went to school in Ottawa. That really helped foster. I've always been passionate about social justice. And in Ottawa, I kind of realized that the way to make change is through policy. But I didn't always love what was going on in government. And I could sit around and complain about it, or I could get up and participate in it. Right. And so that's kind of what drew me to politics, is I realized I have a voice. I'm really good at listening to other people, I think. So I can take their voices and make a difference rather than just sit back and kind of nod along to what other people are saying, but not fully agree.
Okay. So what roles have you played before this? So before you got this position, like what does that look like practically speaking?
I was really involved in my church growing up. Okay. And so actually I've been sent across Canada on various church conferences to represent, as well as internationally. I went to a conference in Germany to represent Canada and one in Guyana. Okay. So I've been around the kind of church politics of things. I grew up in model parliament, specifically the Ontario Youth Parliament. Super amazing organization for high school to university age kids. And then in Ottawa, I was active in protests. I had a volunteer position with Kairos, which is an ecumenical organization. And in 2019, I was the daughter of the vote for Lambton Kent Middlesex, which is my home riding. Okay.
So the youth thing that you were saying, what is that?
Ontario Youth Parliament?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I could talk about them all day. It's a non-for-profit organization that's run by youth for youth, and it's a nonpartisan mock parliament. So they talk about real issues that are hitting Canadians today, but they also do a lot of fun, goofy things that just kind of help foster confidence and passion for making a change. Now,
I've been out of high school for a few years, and even when I was there, I didn't always pay attention. Is that something that like kids would just know about, or is that something that like
No.
how would you get involved in something like this?
I met a friend who was really involved, and she said, you should come join. Other people I know have Googled like youth parliament options and found them. So they're not always easy to find, but they're there, and it's for any, I think it's like 14 to 21. I might have my ages wrong, but youth in Ontario. So
Okay. Well, very, very cool.
yeah.
So you go through all this. What did you go to school for in Ottawa, if you don't mind me asking?
I focused on conflict studies and human rights, but I got a Bachelor of General Arts and a minor in Indigenous Studies.
Okay. All right. So you're really in the mix of a lot of the main issues that are facing Canada.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then how did you, before, maybe I switch these questions a little bit. What does the NDP stand for, and why were you drawn to them?
So when I first became voting age, I sat down and read all of the platforms. And specifically, I was looking for Indigenous rights. And from what I was reading, the NDP had it the most correct. They were really on board with working together and collaboratively with Indigenous nations. And so that's what drew me originally to the NDP. From my position, it sounds cheesy. Their line is, we're fighting for you. And they truly are. Like, I think it's amazing that they stand for the people. Every decision that's made in the NDP is for how we can make Canadians' lives better, what we can do to improve their life. It's not focusing entirely on big corporations. It's looking at how we can improve local small businesses, how we can improve the home structure when it comes to housing or childcare. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty, and then also the full circle, how, bringing in new housing infrastructure can also bring in jobs into that community, right? So they're looking at it all.
Right. So then when this election got called, is this a position you've been looking for, wanting? Is this something that kind of fell in? Or how did you end up saying, you know what, I'm going to put my hat in the ring for this?
So in 2019, I was a daughter of the vote, which means
what does that mean?
Yes, great question. There is an organization called Daughters of the Vote, and the goal is to get more women into politics. So they have... I wish I could remember how many years it is. I think it's every 2 years. They have an event where they fill every seat in the House of Commons in Ottawa with a woman. So there is someone representing every riding across the country. And so I got to represent Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. It was a huge honor. And we talked about, things that are facing Canadians today. We talked to female MPs. We got to talk to... I'm not going to get into it right now because I'll forget everything. It was just an amazing experience. Yeah. And through that, I ended up on the news, and then I had the NDP reaching out to me in a couple different ridings to see if I would be their candidate. And I'm not going to lie, in 2019, I thought, I'm not ready. Yeah. I'm still not a university graduate yet. There's just a few more years of being kind of young and fun that I want to do. Right. And I'm just not ready to make big decisions. Right. And I thought next time it gets offered, I'll seriously think about it and see if it's something I want to do again. I thought about it. Yeah.
So, because I don't know if everybody has paid as much. I mean, you obviously are a political junkie, you said. Yeah. But the rest of us, and I grew up in a family where we argued a lot about politics. Okay. But it was good. It was good, positive. But for a lot of people, I think this last 2 years is probably the first time where they've really authentically thought who we elect matters. Yeah. And it always did matter. But this time it seems more personal. With some of the policies that are going to have to be made. And they're difficult policies. And they're ones that we're not going to get into much, but there's vaccine passports and there's all sorts of things around COVID, but there's stuff happening in Afghanistan. There's relief, Haiti. Like there's so many things that we go, well, what does Canada stand for? And who do I want to send to Ottawa to spend our funds? And so that is a big, long way of asking the question, why should my family trust you? Because there's so much this year, my family got robbed of a lot of things because the people we elected felt this was the best route. And so for us, I think a lot of people, this election is going to feel much more personal. And it's going to go like, this really affected my family. And so this is a question, it might be the most difficult question we have. And we don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's a fair question to say, Why should I trust you with my vote for the next 4 years?
Well, in one way I can say I am young, so I still have lots of energy. I am so passionate. I'm not willing to back down from something that I believe in. So when it comes to my community, that's the foundation of everything to me. I think that we need to support local, and really, with COVID, we were forced into kind of isolation. It was difficult for a lot of community members that were used to gathering at coffee shops, that were used to, local quilting groups. I want to bring back what that local community feels like, bringing back those moments that foster, our next generation to want to stay in this area, to want to get jobs here. And so that's really important to me, and I'm not about to back down from that. I still have lots of years to give my heart and soul to what the constituents want. I have a voice that needs to be heard, and it's not my voice that needs to be heard. It's my voice speaking the words of others. I'm willing and ready to hear what everyone has to say and to see what Ottawa has to say about their opinions.
So if you give me maybe this is, I don't know how easy of a question this will be to answer, but if you can give me what are 3-4 things that you're really hoping, if you send me to office for this region, here's 3 or 4 things that tangibly I want to try to work towards.
Wonderful question. I'm going to look at my notes for the first time because I don't want to forget. So in the next 4 years, tangibly, big things for me that are actually on the NDP platform is the housing crisis that's currently going on, getting reliable internet and cell service to rural areas, and affordable and accessible childcare. So kind of working backwards, bringing in the NDP wants to bring in $10 a day national childcare and also increase the number of childcare facilities and pay childcare workers a fair livable wage. With doing all of that, it really increases our economy. It provides more jobs. It allows more parents to get into the workforce. There are people that right now can't afford to get a job because they can't afford childcare, or they're sitting on wait lists for months to try and get a place for their child to go. So that's really important to me. The cell phone and internet in rural areas. I was a student finishing up my degree during the online learning of COVID, and my internet service was not reliable. It was frustrating and difficult, and I had to argue with my parents every day because I was living with them to save money, and it was a battle. And I don't think that kids should have to go through that. I don't think parents should have to go through that. So that's a big one for me, just absolutely personally.
Well, we're located right now in Malahide. If you go one concession that way, you have nothing.
I was trying to send an email in the parking lot, and I was like, I can't do this.
This is the Bermuda Triangle of southwestern Ontario. All cell phone signals are lost here. It's a true story.
So it's really interesting because both we interviewed our mayor and deputy mayor earlier this week, and they both brought that up as something that for the first time, because people complained before, but during this pandemic is the first time it really got some traction to say, no, this matters.
This is important.
Keeping people connected. This matters. We have to find a way to do this. This internet thing isn't a fad that's going to fade anytime fast, right?
Absolutely. And then with housing, I said I was living with my parents to save money. I've since moved out, but that was a struggle. Rent is going way up. We don't have first-time home options for younger people who want to, get their first house, or transition housing for those farmers that need to move into town. They can no longer work their land, but aren't quite ready for a nursing home. There's no economic options for housing. And so I think it's really important that we work on the housing crisis and bring down the rates so that people can afford a place that they're proud of. And investing in the home isn't just investing in a house or a building. It's investing in a place where people can have birthday parties. They can congregate together to have dinner and work on homework. They have the space to do school projects. It's not just a building. And I think that it's important that we remember that we're investing in families and futures when we're building a house.
So when you talk about housing, that's a huge, in our local Housing has doubled and tripled in the last couple of years.
Insane.
I mean, renting right now is $1,700 a month, which is more than anybody who is just living on, ODSP or any of the government services. They can't even afford.
Or even minimum wage.
No, minimum wage would be incredibly hard. And so you talk about that's where I think all three are very much related, because if I can't afford childcare, something's got to give. So if me and my wife want to live, we can't afford to send our kid to childcare, but we can't afford housing if she doesn't work. And so we find, at least in our region, there's a lot of people that are starting to teeter on the verge of saying something's got to give because we can't afford housing. And the jobs just don't pay enough. And so do you have, and maybe this is an unfair question, and so you can at any point be like, look, this is not what I said. But do you have something practical with the housing that you've been hearing through the NDP side? Like, what are some thoughts on how to help with that? Because that is, for us, we run a transitional housing thing in Elmer.
Amazing.
And really cool. Yeah, except for we can't transition because we can bring people in for the emergency housing that we have, but then you can get them settled and you can get them into a place where they're stable, but they can't afford anything. So then you're stuck. And so we feel like this is something huge. So again, if you have anything that you've been kind of hearing, like, is there any route that you feel like the NDP is going to try to solve this? Or are we still at the place where we need to have discussions to sort some of this out?
A little bit of both. So the NDP platform that I was reading up on it, doing my homework for this interview.
It is a long platform. It is a detailed, yes.
It is detailed. They know what they're doing. One of the points with housing is they want to fund building affordable housing in communities. So, and they don't want to privatize it. They want to make sure that the jobs are going to people in that area. So then it brings in jobs for building the houses. There's also, I don't know the details of it, but there's mention of waiving the HST and GST that would go into building those houses. So what would go back to the country, they're going to kind of waive that to make it more affordable, cheaper to build, a little bit easier. You don't have that extra cost to worry about because it's going to go back into the economy by building those jobs. So it's not the main focus to get those taxes. The main focus is to have that housing for people to move into.
Okay. That's some good thoughts. Because that is such a huge issue. Like I cannot overstate how big of an issue that is for our region. I think it's for most. I mean, we've been lucky because housing has been very affordable here for most of my life. We're only now really facing it as people from Toronto are coming in and they're going, this is a bargain for these houses. And we're going, yeah, but it's like $200,000 more than we ever thought they'd be worth. And so
I could be getting it wrong, but the London St. Thomas Realtor organization, I'm getting the wrong name, but their stats say that from 2019, the housing market has jumped like 50-something percent, 22%. I got it very wrong, 22%. But then going back 2 more years to 2017, it's like 58. And then going back again, like it's continuing to go up so significantly. So we got to do something.
Right. So on the flip side, because we have a bit of time here, so what about the mental health piece? So this is the other side of it that we've talked a lot about over the last, leading into COVID, there was a lot of talk, but we got to do more with mental health. And then COVID has destroyed so much of that in so many ways, because a lot of the resources that people would go to for mental health were closed, or they were only over the phone, which is better than nothing, but it is not what most people really need when they're in a moment of crisis.
Yeah.
Is there thoughts on how do we exit COVID and help people with their mental health after, a really, really tough 18 months?
For me, I see the community building activities. It's not going to solve all the problems at all. It's not going to come close to fixing what needs to be done, but bringing back that sense of community, bringing back a personal interaction between people, having something to look forward to every week, it'll just help remind people that they're not alone, that they're not alone in this world, that there's people that care about them, and they're not alone in what they're going through, that there are other people that have similar issues or similar concerns and thoughts. the NDP truly believe that mental health is something that's still not dealt with properly in Canada. It's actually part of their platform to bring in with regards to like dental care and proper pharma care. One of the steps is also mental health care.
Right. And I'd love to see it because I know for us, often when people come in, they're looking for help, and we go, okay, well, I'd love to get you set up with a counselor. And if you go to the government facilities, I mean, you're going to be on a wait time. And if you do get in, it's better than nothing. I don't want to sit here and complain about it, but it's not enough. And so then you, okay, well, let's go to the private end. It's $130, $170 an hour. Well, for most people, that's not in the cards.
No.
And so it's one of those things that the resources are available, but it's like they're not within reach. And I think that's really painful to go, you know, we could help you with your crisis. You just can't afford what you need.
And that's what the NDP wants to do. We want to bridge that gap. And it's once again bringing that cheesy line that we're fighting for you. We're bridging that gap between what people need and what's kind of sitting over here just out of reach. And that's so much of what the NDP platform is. It's just seeing, you know, here's the solution that is there that we've discussed that's just out of reach. How can we bridge that?
So right now, let's get back to you a little bit here.
Okay.
We got a little off.
I like talking about me.
Right? So you were working full-time while doing this. So
yes.
How in the world are you balancing this election and working full-time?
I have a very nice employer who's excited for me and proud of me, so that's helpful. Also, that honestly, that's all I can say. The rest of it is a little bit of lack of sleep.
What's your caffeine choice?
I try very hard to stay away from caffeine.
You're so much of a better person than I am. Okay.
See, when I need it, so I need it to work.
Okay, so then, before I get to my last question, what do you guys got?
Well, I thought when you were speaking earlier about taking the time to read your party's platform, and just based on what I was seeing today in terms of the investment of time to be thorough about making sure like you're on top of, literally in this election, you've been given like no time.
Yeah.
It's there was no advance warning. It's not like you had a timeline to say, okay, well, we know in the next 90 days we're going to get to where we are. We've got our platform ready to go. All of our pieces are in place. And I mean, you're working, you're investing time to your own future. You're going back to school in September. So not only are you working, but you're schooling. And you've decided to serve your community this way by putting your hat in the ring. And now you just said that you have an employer that's very excited for you to be able to do this. I think it speaks to the character of where you come from to put that time and effort in. What kind of role models have you had in your life that have led you to have that type of attitude that says I'm willing to sacrifice some things of myself, because I've got other things that I think are more important.
My parents are amazing. I wish I could say something other than my parents, because I feel like everyone thinks that their parents are the go-to role models. But my dad was active in my community through the scouting organization, through the Lions Club. He was always there to lend a helping hand to whatever neighbor needed it. At the end of the day, he made sure that we had shelter and food and knew that we were loved and knew that he knew how to love our neighbors. He made sure that we knew how to love our neighbors and how to give back to the community. And so that was really big for me. And watching my mom, she raised the most wonderful children, if I can just say. And she also gave back to the community. She was very active in the church. She was always volunteering at the schools. We were the house like that our friends always came to, had the best snacks. So I watched my parents build the proper boundaries. And I think that's another thing to discuss. It's not necessarily that I'm sacrificing certain things. It's that I know where my boundaries lie and how much I can give, and where I need to say, I need a minute. So as much as I'm getting a little bit less sleep and I'm giving all the time I can to the campaign so that I can help Canadians, I also make sure at the end of the day that I have an hour to myself to discuss with my roommate or my parents over the phone, whoever it is, to kind of debrief my day and make sure I get that time for myself too. And I just want to mention, I think that is an important aspect to being a busy person, is to making sure you know how much to sacrifice and when to put up that boundary.
Oh, that's good. We certainly don't value rest and self-care as much as we could in our culture.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what I want to kind of leave in the last question, unless you guys have other questions. No? Okay, we'll go one. We'll give you a little more time here.
Yeah.
So one of my questions, because I want to know, so power does funny things to people. And sometimes people are looking for position, and you've already answered some of this question through the interview, which is good. And I've loved hearing part of, there's a natural progression to you wanting to become a leader. And I love that. My question then is, so if at the end of this election you don't get elected, what does the future look for in regards to continuing to fight for this? What do the next 4 years look like for you? What are the things that you're kind of thinking, okay, well, if this doesn't work, this is where I can spend my time? And the reason I ask you is not to be like, well, just in case you lose, what's plan B? But I think there's also, I think people listening to you, and a lot of the topics we're going to talk about are within that 90% that we all agree on. We all agree that housing's an issue. We all agree most of these things. So what do we do in a practical standpoint to continue to try to develop that in our community, try to make our community better? And what are some of the things that you would say, these are the things that you could get involved in to do that?
Interesting question. Well, first off, on the political side of things, whether there's an election year or not, most parties have what's called a riding association. So if you would like to be affiliated with a party and kind of help keep the other, or the the in-office MP accountable and kind of volunteer in the community, you could join part of your riding association if you do want to affiliate with a party. Otherwise, giving back to the community, I think tangibly is rallying, having difficult conversations, making sure that you don't turn a blind eye when you hear something is kind of off in the community. Show up to your local farmers market and tell your friends about it. Talk about if you own a business, see if you can swing doing a livable wage, or, increasing more than minimum, and really showing your neighbors that you appreciate them, and building that sense of community that goes beyond just, oh, that's my neighbor Bob. Knowing that Bob has 3 grandkids that like to come over on Sunday afternoon. It's just digging a little bit deeper and talking to the people who are marginalized in your community and seeing what they need that you can help with, or asking people for help with what you need. It's really listening. I think a long, convoluted way to say you need to listen to other people and then have those conversations, and together you can find a solution.
Right. I really like it. So I had an interesting conversation the other day with somebody. They were saying that they were interacting with somebody from a different country, and they found they really struggled because the person would pause and there'd be silence in the conversation. And he's like, it was so refreshing because the person was actually listening and thinking, but we're not used to that. We're jump in, right? And I do think that, and one of our hopes with this podcast and with everything that we're doing is really to get people to actually converse in a meaningful way. There is too much yelling back and forth. And as we've started looking into the different parties and what they stand for, that there's a lot that's good.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that's being fought for that's well. And I think there's a lot that can actually unite us as Canadians. And then there are some things that we obviously view differently, but that's okay. I think if you can even understand, so why does the NDP view it this way and why does the Liberals view it this way? I think if you can understand that, have that conversation, there's no reason why we can't enjoy, I think, being challenged by each other's viewpoints and being challenged.
Exactly.
I think it's so healthy. So with that,
hey, I have one more thing from the peanut gallery.
All right.
And this is kind of like a little bit of, I don't know if this is like a cheesy question, but
they're my favorite.
Well, I don't know. What I would like to know, I would like to know what you would like your Canada to look like. If you could envision, or you could see Canada in the next 5, 10, 15 years, what things would you like to see Canada like represent? Like it's a federal election. We are talking about a greater picture, not just our small community, but also in terms of what we as a people people look to us and they see this, and we could be like, yes, because that's what Canadians do. That's who Canadians are. What would that dream be for you?
We have such a unique position in the world that we could be who people look to. And I would love that. I would love for Canada to be a place where, in a dream society, people don't face systemic barriers, that we have clean drinking water for every single one of our citizens, that we are accessible when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to public transport, that we are leading in climate change efforts to reduce our carbon emissions. Maybe in 15 years, we'll have all electric vehicles and we won't have to worry about our, footprint. A dream society would be that we are leading in social change. Now, 15 years is kind of short. I think that, maybe we can make some of this happen. It'll take a long time to remove some of the systemic barriers in society, but that's kind of my main focus, is I want everyone to feel that there is a level playing field, and that everyone is valued and doesn't have to fear when they walk down the street if they are seen differently by other people for whatever marginalized reason affects them.
Right.
Thank you.
That would be a wonderful world.
Oh, it's a utopia in my head. But I recognize that comes with a lot of hard work. And it's just a lot of cooperation too, and a lot of difficult conversations. And that's the conversations that we keep coming back to is kind of the key to making change.
Right. And so much of that at the end of the day is actually going to be on a personal level where people have to own their own lives. And you guys can try to enforce rules, but a lot of the systemic stuff is going to be, we're going to have to find a way to love each other.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to find a way to love people who are different than us and who think different than us. But I think it's a good goal worth fighting for. It is a challenge. I mean, human history tells us that this is not an easy thing. But I think it's worth fighting for. I think community is worth fighting for. And when you travel the world, and I've seen a few places, you come back to Canada and go, yeah, it is not perfect, but man, we have a long way to go, but wow, we have come a long way as a people, as a nation. And there are a lot of people ahead of us who have done a lot of good. Yes, some have done damage, but there's a lot of good people who have built this nation that we can have this conversation and we can sit across here and we can dialogue and think differently and be free. And I'm hoping we can keep that Canada. And that sounds like the Canada that you want. And so, all right. Thank you so much for your time. I know your time is incredibly valuable. And so
I'm so happy to be here. Genuinely, I appreciated this so much. I love conversation. You guys are so welcoming.
Where can people get a hold of you? I'm assuming they just search Katelyn Cody, or Katelyn Cody. Not Carolyn, Katelyn Cody. Where do you have a website you want to send people to? Is it the social media platforms? Where would they go?
Yeah, easiest way right now is probably Facebook. We're really responsive on Messenger if you have any questions. And then we have daily updates and posts on what I'm up to, what the party's up to. So definitely Katelyn Cody on Facebook would be the way to go, I think.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing how this election turns out. Looking forward to some more good discussions and hopefully looking forward to a better Canada at the end of this election. So
fingers crossed.
We will see you on the next one. Take care.
Good job, Katelyn. Woo!
Thank you.